witness unto me is God, is the exalted, the protector, the ancient of days. While Sheikh Ahmad was sojourning in Kermanshah, he received so many evidences of ardent devotion from Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza that on one occasion he was moved to refer to the prince in such terms: "Muhammad Ali I regard as my own son, though he be ascendant of Fath Ali." A considerable number of seekers and disciples thronged to his house and eagerly attended his lectures. To none, however, did he feel inclined to show the consideration and affectionate regard which characterized his attitude towards Sayyid Kazim. He seemed to have singled him out from among the multitude that crowded to see him, and to be preparing him to carry on with undiminished vigor his work after his death. One of his disciples one day questioned Sheikh Ahmad concerning the word which the promised one is expected to utter in the fullness of time, a word so appallingly tremendous that the 313 chiefs and nobles of the earth would each and all flee in consternation as if overwhelmed by its stupendous weight. To him Sheikh Ahmad replied, "How can you presume to sustain the weight of the word which the chieftains of the earth are incapable of bearing? Seek not to gratify an impossible desire. Cease asking me this question and beseech forgiveness from God." That presumptuous questioner again pressed him to disclose the nature of that word. At last Sheikh Ahmad replied, "Were you to attain that day, were you to be told to repudiate the guardianship of Ali and to denounce its validity, what would you say?" "God forbid," he exclaimed, "such things can never be. That such words should proceed out of the mouth of the promised one is to me inconceivable." How grievous the mistake he made, and how pitiful his plight! His faith was weighed in the balance, and was found wanting, inasmuch as he failed to recognize that he who must needs be manifest is endowed with that sovereign power which no man dare question. His is the right to command whatever he willeth, and to decree that which he pleaseth. Whoever hesitates, whoever, though it be for the twinkling of an eye or less, questions his authority, is deprived of his grace, and is accounted of the fallen. And yet few, if any, among those who listened to Sheikh Ahmad in that city, and heard him unfold the mysteries of the allusions in the sacred scriptures, were able to appreciate the significance of his utterances, or to apprehend their purpose. Sayyid Kazim, his able and distinguished lieutenant, alone could claim to have understood his meaning. After the death of Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza, Sheikh Ahmad, freed from the urgent solicitations of the prince to extend his sojourn in Kermanshah, transferred his residence to Karbila. Though to outward seeming he was circling round the shrine of the Sayyidu Shuhada, the Prince of Martyrs, the Imam Hussein, his heart, whilst he performed those rites, was set upon that true Hussein, the only object of his devotions. A host of the most distinguished ulamas and mujtahids thronged to see him. Many began to envy his reputation, and a number sought to undermine his authority. However much they strove, they failed to shake his position of undoubted preeminence amongst the learned men of that city. Eventually, that shining light was summoned to shed its radiance upon the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Thither he journeyed. There he pursued with unstinted devotion his labors, and there he was laid to rest, beneath the shadow of the Prophet's sepulchre, for the understanding of whose cause he had so faithfully labored. Ere he departed from Karbila, he confided to Sayyid Kazim, his chosen successor, the secret of his mission, and instructed him to strive to kindle in every receptive heart the fire that had burned so brightly within him. However much Sayyid Kazim insisted on accompanying him as far as Najaf, Sheikh Ahmad refused to comply with his request. "You have no time to lose," were the last words which he addressed to him. "Every fleeting hour should be fully and wisely utilized. You should gird up the loin of endeavor and strive day and night to rend asunder, by the grace of God and by the hand of wisdom and loving kindness, those veils of heedlessness that have blinded the eyes of men. For verily I say, the hour is drawing nigh, the hour I have besought God to spare me from witnessing, for the earthquake of the last hour will be tremendous. You should pray to God to be spared the overpowering trials of that day, for neither of us is capable of withstanding its sweeping force. Others of greater endurance and power have been destined to bear this stupendous weight. Men whose hearts are sanctified from all earthly things, and whose strength is reinforced by the potency of his power. Having spoken these words, Sheikh Ahmad bade him farewell, urged him to face valiantly the trials that must needs afflict him, and committed him to the care of God. In Karbala, Syed Kazim devoted himself to the work initiated by his master, expounded his teachings, defended his cause, and answered whatever questions perplexed the minds of his disciples. The vigor with which he prosecuted his task inflamed the animosity of the ignorant and envious. For 40 years, they clamored, we have suffered the pretentious teachings of Sheikh Ahmad to be spread with no opposition whatever on our part. We no longer can tolerate similar pretensions on the part of his successor, who rejects the belief in the resurrection of the body, who repudiates the literal interpretation of the mirage, the ascent of Muhammad to heaven, who regards the signs of the coming day as allegorical, and who preaches a doctrine heretical in character and subversive of the best tenets of Orthodox Islam. The louder their clamour and protestations, the firmer grew the determination of Syed Kazim to prosecute his mission and fulfill his trust. He addressed an epistle to Sheikh Ahmad, wherein he set forth at length the calumnies that had been uttered against him, and acquainted him with the character and extent of their opposition. In it he ventured to inquire as to how long he was destined to submit to the unrelenting fanaticism of a stubborn and ignorant people, and prayed to be enlightened regarding the time when the promised one was to be made manifest. To this Sheikh Ahmad replied, Be assured of the grace of your God. Be not grieved at their doings. The mystery of this cause must needs be made manifest, and the secret of this message must needs be divulged. I can say no more. I can appoint no time. His cause will be made known after Hin. Ask me not of the things which, if revealed unto you, might only pain you. There is a footnote. According to the Abjad notation, the numerical value of the word Hin is 68. It was in the year AH 1268, that is AD 1851 to 1852, that Baha'u'llah, while confined in the Sia Shal of Tehran, received the first intimations of his divine mission. Of this he hinted in the odes which he revealed in that year. How great, how very great is his cause, that even to so exalted a personage as Syed Kazim words such as these should have been addressed. This answer of Sheikh Ahmad imparted solace and strength to the heart of Syed Kazim, who, with redoubled determination, continued to withstand the onslaught of an envious and insidious enemy. Sheikh Ahmad died soon after, in the year AH 1242, in Hadi, in the neighborhood of Medina, at the age of 81, and was laid to rest in the cemetery of Baqi, in the close vicinity of the resting place of Muhammad in the holy city of Medina. Chapter 2. The Mission of Syed Kazim-i Rashdi. The news of the passing of his beloved master brought unspeakable sorrow to the heart of Syed Kazim. Inspired by the verse of the Koran, Fain would they put out God's light with their mouths, but God only desireth to perfect his light, albeit the infidels abhor it. He arose with unswerving purpose to consummate the task with which Sheikh Ahmad had entrusted him. He found himself, after the removal of so distinguished a protector, a victim of the slanderous tongue and unrelating enmity of the people around him. They attacked his person, scorned his teachings, and reviled his name. At the instigation of a powerful and notorious Shia leader, Syed Ibrahim-i Qazvini, the enemies of Syed Kazim leagued together and determined to destroy him. Thereupon, Syed Kazim conceived the plan of securing the support and goodwill of one of the most formidable and outstanding ecclesiastical dignitaries of Persia, the renowned Haji Syed Muhammad Bakir-e Rashdi, who lived in Isfahan, and whose authority extended far beyond the confines of that city. This friendship and sympathy, Syed Kazim thought, would enable him to pursue untrammeled the course of his activities, and would considerably enhance the influence which he exercised over his disciples. Would that one amongst you, he was often heard to say to his followers, could arise and with complete detachment journey to Isfahan and deliver this message from me to that learned Syed. Why is it that in the beginning you showed such marked consideration and affection for the late Sheikh Ahmad, and now have suddenly detached yourself from the body of his chosen disciples? Why is it that you have abandoned us to the mercy of our opponents? Would that such a messenger, putting his trust in God, might arise to unravel whatever mysteries perplex the mind of that learned Syed, and dispel such doubts as might have alienated his sympathy. Would that he were able to obtain from him a solemn declaration testifying to the unquestioned authority of Sheikh Ahmad, and to the truth and soundness of his teachings. Would that he also, after having secured such a testimony, might visit Mashhad, and there obtain a similar pronouncement from Mirza Askari, the foremost ecclesiastical leader in that holy city, and then, having completed his mission, might return in triumph to this place. Again and again did Syed Kazim find opportunity to reiterate his appeal. None, however, ventured to respond to his call, except a certain Mirza Muhit-i Kirmani, who expressed readiness to undertake this mission. To him, Syed Kazim replied, "Beware of touching the lion's tail. Belittle not the delicacy and difficulty of such a mission." He then, turning his face towards his youthful disciple, Mullah Hussein-i Bushrui, the Babul Bab, addressed him in these words: "Arise and perform this mission, for I declare you equal to this task. The Almighty will graciously assist you, and will crown your endeavors with success." There is a footnote. Mullah Hussein-i Bushrui, the Babul Bab, was the first to believe in the Bab, who gave him this title. Mullah Hussein joyously sprang to his feet, kissed the hem of his teacher's garment, vowed his loyalty to him, and started forthwith on his journey. With complete severance and noble reserve, he set out to achieve his end. Arriving in Isfahan, he sought immediately the presence of the learned Syed. Clad in mean attire and laden with the dust of travel, he appeared amidst the vast and richly apparelled company of the disciples of that distinguished leader, an insignificant and negligible figure. Unobserved and undaunted, he advanced to a place which faced the seat occupied by that renowned teacher. Summoning to his aid all the courage and confidence with which the instructions of Syed Kazim had inspired him, he addressed Haji Syed Muhammad Bakir in these words: "Hearken, O Syed, to my words, for response to my plea will ensure the safety of the faith of the Prophet of God, and refusal to consider my message will cause it grievous injury." These bold and courageous words, uttered with directness and force, produced a surprising impression upon the Syed. He suddenly interrupted his discourse, and, ignoring his audience, listened with close attention to the message which this strange visitor had brought. His disciples, amazed at this extraordinary behavior, rebuked this sudden intruder and denounced his presumptuous pretensions. With extreme politeness, in firm and dignified language, Mullah Hussein hinted at their discourtesy and shallowness, and expressed surprise at their arrogance and vainglory. The Syed was highly pleased with the demeanor and argument which the visitor so strikingly displayed. He deplored and apologized for the unseemly conduct of his own disciples. In order to compensate for their ingratitude, he extended every conceivable kindness to that youth, assured him of his support, and besought him to deliver his message. Thereupon, Mullah Hussein acquainted him with the nature and object of the mission with which he had been entrusted. To this the learned Syed replied: "As we in the beginning believed that both Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazim were actuated by no desire except to advance the cause of knowledge and safeguard the sacred interests of the faith, we felt prompted to extend to them our heartiest support and to extol their teachings. In later years, however, we have noticed so many conflicting statements and obscure and mysterious allusions in their writings that we felt it advisable to keep silent for a time, and to refrain from either censure or applause. To this Mullah Hussein replied, "I cannot but deplore such silence on your part, for I firmly believe that it involves the loss of a splendid opportunity to advance the cause of truth. It is for you to set forth specifically such passages in their writings as appear to you mysterious or inconsistent with the precepts of the faith, and I will, with the aid of God, undertake to expound their true meaning." The poise, the dignity and confidence which characterized the behavior of this unexpected messenger greatly impressed Haji Syed Muhammad Bakir. He begged him not to press the matter at this moment, but to wait until a later day, when in private converse he might acquaint him with his own doubts and misgivings. Mullah Hussein, however, feeling that delay might prove harmful to the cause he had at heart, insisted upon an immediate conference with him about the weighty problems which he felt impelled and able to resolve. The Syed was moved to tears by the youthful enthusiasm, the sincerity and serene confidence to which the countenance of Mullah Hussein so admirably testified. He sent immediately for some of the works written by Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazim and began to question Mullah Hussein regarding those passages which had excited his disapproval and surprise. To each reference the messenger replied with characteristic vigor, with masterly knowledge, and befitting modesty. He continued in this manner, in the presence of the assembled disciples, to expound the teachings of Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazim, to vindicate their truth, and to defend their cause, until the time when the muezzin, calling the faithful to prayer, suddenly interrupted the flow of his argument. The next day he similarly, in the presence of a large and representative assembly, and whilst facing the Syed, resumed his eloquent defence of the high mission entrusted by an almighty providence to Sheikh Ahmad and his successor. A deep silence fell upon his hearers. They were seized with wonder at the cogency of his argument and the tone and manner of his speech. The Syed publicly promised that on the following day he would himself issue a written declaration wherein he would testify to the eminence of the position held by both Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazim, and would pronounce whosoever deviated from their path as one who had turned aside from the faith of the Prophet himself. He would likewise bear witness to their penetrative insight and their correct and profound understanding of the mysteries which the faith of Muhammad enshrined. The Syed redeemed his pledge, and with his own hand penned the promised declaration. He wrote at length, and in the course of his testimony paid a tribute to the character and learning of Mullah Hussein. He spoke in glowing terms of Syed Kazim, apologized for his former attitude, and expressed the hope that in the days to come he might be enabled to make amends for his past and regrettable conduct towards him. He read himself to the disciples the text of this written testimony, and delivered it unsealed to Mullah Hussein, authorizing him to share its contents with whomsoever he pleased, that all might know the extent of his devotion to Syed Kazim. No sooner had Mullah Hussein retired than the Syed charged one of his trusted attendants to follow in the footsteps of the visitor, and find out the place where he was residing. The attendant followed him to a modest building which served as a madrisi, and saw him enter a room which, except for a worn-out mat which covered its floor, was devoid of furniture. He watched him arrive, offer his prayer and thanksgiving to God, and lie down upon that mat with nothing to cover him except his abba. Having reported to his master all that he had observed, the attendant was again instructed to deliver to Mullah Hussein the sum of 100 tumans, and to express his sincere apologies of his master for his inability to extend to so remarkable a messenger a hospitality that befitted his station. To this offer Mullah Hussein sent the following reply: "Tell your master that his real gift to me is the spirit of fairness with which he received me, and the open-mindedness which prompted him, despite his exalted rank, to respond to the message which I, a lowly stranger, brought him. Return this money to your master, for I, as a messenger, ask for neither recompense nor reward. We nourish your souls for the sake of God. We seek from you neither recompense nor thanks. The Quran 76:9. My prayer for your master is that earthly leadership may never hinder him from acknowledging and testifying to the truth. There is a footnote here. The Bab, in the Dala'il-i-Sabi, refers to Mullah Hussein in these terms: You especially know who is the first witness of that faith. You know that the majority of the doctors of the Sheikhi and the Sayyidiyya and other sects admired his science and his talent. When he came to Isfahan, the urchins of the town cried out as he passed, a ragged student has just arrived. But behold, this man by his proofs and arguments convinced a Sayyid, one known for his proven scientific knowledge, Muhammad Bakir. Truly, that is one of the proofs of this manifestation, for after the death of the Sayyid, this personage went out to see most of the doctors of Islam and found truth only with a master of truth. It was then that he attained the destiny which had been determined for him. In truth, the people of the beginning and of the end of this manifestation envy him, and will envy him until the day of judgment. And who then can accuse this mastermind of mental weakness and infidelity? From the Book of Seven Proofs, translated by A.L.M. Nichols, page 54. Haji Sayyid Muhammad Bakir died before the year A.H. 1260, A.D. 1844, the year that witnessed the birth of the faith proclaimed by the Bab. He remained to his last moment a staunch supporter and fervent admirer of Sayyid Kazim. Having fulfilled the first part of his mission, Mullah Hussein dispatched this written testimony of Haji Sayyid Muhammad Bakir to his master in Karbala, and directed his steps towards Mashhad, determined to deliver to the best of his ability the message which he was charged to give to Mirza Askari. Immediately the letter, enclosing the Sayyid's written declaration, was delivered to Sayyid Kazim, the latter was so rejoiced that he forthwith sent to Mullah Hussein his reply, expressing his grateful appreciation of the exemplary manner in which he had discharged his trust. He was so delighted with the answer he received that, interrupting the course of his lecture, he read out to his disciples both the letter of Mullah Hussein and the written testimony enclosed in the letter. He afterwards shared with them the epistle which he himself had written to Mullah Hussein in recognition of the remarkable service he had rendered him. In it Sayyid Kazim paid such a glowing tribute to his high attainments, to his ability and character, that a few among those who heard it suspected that Mullah Hussein was that promised one to whom their master unceasingly referred, the one whom he so often declared to be living in their very midst, and yet to have remained unrecognized by them all. That communication enjoined upon Mullah Hussein the fear of God, urged him to regard it as the most potent instrument with which to withstand the onslaught of the enemy, and the distinguishing feature of every true follower of the faith. It was couched in such terms of tender affection that no one who read it could doubt that the writer was bidding farewell to his beloved disciple, and that he entertained no hope of ever meeting him again in this world. In those days, Sayyid Kazim became increasingly aware of the approach of the hour at which the promised one was to be revealed. He realized how dense were those veils that hindered the seekers from apprehending the glory of the concealed manifestation. He accordingly exerted his utmost endeavor to remove, gradually, with caution and wisdom, whatever barriers might stand in the way of the full recognition of that hidden treasure of God. He repeatedly urged his disciples to bear in mind the fact that he whose advent they were expecting would appear neither from Jabulka nor from Jabulsa. A footnote says, mysterious cities, from one of which Imam Mihdi will appear. He even hinted at his presence in their very midst. You behold him with your own eyes, he often observed, and yet recognize him not. To his disciples who questioned him regarding the signs of the manifestation, he would say, he is of noble lineage. He is a descendant of the prophet of God, of the family of Hashim. He is young in age, and is possessed of innate knowledge. His learning is derived not from the teachings of Sheikh Ahmad, but from God. My knowledge is but a drop compared with the immensity of his knowledge. My attainments a speck of dust in the face of the wonders of his grace and power. Nay, immeasurable is the difference. He is of medium height, abstains from smoking, and is of extreme devoutness and piety. The Dawnbreakers, Nabil's narrative, recorded for the Handicapped, Tape 2. Certain of the Seed's disciples, despite the testimonies of their master, believed him to be the promised one, for in him they recognized the signs to which he was alluding. Among them was a certain Mullah Midi-i-Kui, who went so far as to make public this belief. Whereupon the Seed was sore displeased, and would have cast him out from the company of his chosen followers, had he not begged forgiveness and expressed his repentance for his action. Sheikh Hassan-i Zunuzi himself informed me that he too entertained such doubts, that he prayed to God that if his supposition was well-founded, he should be confirmed in his belief, and if not, that he should be delivered from such idle fancy. I was so perturbed, he once related to me, that for days I could neither eat nor sleep. My days were spent in the service of Sayyid Kazim, to whom I was greatly attached. One day at the hour of dawn, I was suddenly awakened by Mullah Noruz, one of his intimate attendants, who in great excitement bade me arise and follow him. We went to the house of Sayyid Kazim, where we found him fully dressed, wearing his abba, and ready to leave his home. He asked me to accompany him. "A highly esteemed and distinguished person," he said, "has arrived. I feel it incumbent upon both of us to visit him." The morning light had just broken when I found myself walking with him through the streets of Karbila. We soon reached a house, at the door of which stood a youth, as if expectant to receive us. He wore a green turban, and his countenance revealed an expression of humility and kindliness which I can never describe. He quietly approached us, extended his arms towards Sayyid Kazim, and lovingly embraced him. His affability and loving kindness singularly contrasted with the sense of profound reverence that characterized the attitude of Sayyid Kazim towards him. Speechless, and with bowed head, he received the many expressions of affection and esteem with which that youth greeted him. We were soon led by him to the upper floor of that house, and entered a chamber bedecked with flowers and redolent of the loveliest perfume. He bade us be seated. We knew not, however, what seats we actually occupied, so overpowering was the sense of delight which seized us. We observed a silver cup, which had been placed in the center of the room, which our youthful host, soon after we were seated, filled to overflowing, and handed to Sayyid Kazim, saying, "A drink of a pure beverage shall their Lord give them." Quran 76:21. Sayyid Kazim held the cup with both hands and quaffed it. A feeling of reverent joy filled his being, a feeling which he could not suppress. I too was presented with a cupful of that beverage, though no words were addressed to me. All that was spoken at that memorable gathering was the above-mentioned verse of the Koran. Soon after, the host arose from his seat and, accompanying us to the threshold of the house, bade us farewell. I was mute with wonder, and knew not how to express the cordiality of his welcome, the dignity of his bearing, the charm of that face, and the delicious fragrance of that beverage. How great was my amazement when I saw my teacher quaff without the least hesitation that holy draught from a silver cup, the use of which, according to the precepts of Islam, is forbidden to the faithful. I could not explain the motive which could have induced the Seed to manifest such profound reverence in the presence of that youth, a reverence which even the sight of the shrine of the Sayyidu Shuhada had failed to excite. 3 days later, I saw that same youth arrive and take his seat in the midst of the company of the assembled disciples of Sayyid Kazim. He sat close to the threshold, and with the same modesty and dignity of bearing, listened to the discourse of the Seyyid. As soon as his eyes fell upon that youth, the Seyyid discontinued his address and held his peace, whereupon one of his disciples begged him to resume the argument which he had left unfinished. "What more shall I say?" replied Seyyid Kazim, as he turned his face toward the Bab. "Lo, the truth is more manifest than the ray of light that has fallen upon that lap." I immediately observed that the ray to which the Seyyid referred had fallen upon the lap of that same youth whom we had recently visited. "Why is it," that questioner inquired, "that you neither reveal his name nor identify his person?" To this the Seyyid replied by pointing with his finger to his own throat, implying that were he to divulge his name, they both would be put to death instantly. This added still further to my perplexity. I had already heard my teacher observe that so great is the perversity of this generation, that were he to point with his finger to the promised one and say, "He indeed is the beloved, the desire of your hearts and mine," they would still fail to recognize and acknowledge him. I saw the Seyyid actually point out with his finger the ray of light that had fallen on that lap, and yet none among those who were present seemed to apprehend its meaning. I, for my part, was convinced that the Seyyid himself could never be the promised one, but that a mystery inscrutable to us all lay concealed in that strange and attractive youth. Several times I ventured to approach Seyyid Kazim and seek from him an elucidation of this mystery. Every time I approached him, I was overcome by a sense of awe which his personality so powerfully inspired. Many a time I heard him remark, "O Sheikh Hassan, rejoice that your name is Hassan, praiseworthy, Hassan your beginning and Hassan your end. You have been privileged to attain to the day of Sheikh Ahmad. You have been closely associated with me, and in the days to come yours shall be the inestimable joy of beholding what eye hath not seen, ear heard not, nor any heart conceived." I often felt the urge to seek alone the presence of that Hashemite youth and to endeavor to fathom his mystery. I watched him several times as he stood in an attitude of prayer at the doorway of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. So wrapped was he in his devotions that he seemed utterly oblivious of those around him. Tears ringed from his eyes, and from his lips fell words of glorification and praise of such power and beauty as even the noblest passages of our sacred scriptures could not hope to surpass. The words, "O God, my beloved, my heart's desire," were uttered with a frequency and ardor that those of the visiting pilgrims who were near enough to hear him instinctively interrupted the course of their devotions and marveled at the evidences of piety and veneration which that youthful countenance evinced. Like him, they were moved to tears, and from him they learned the lesson of true adoration. Having completed his prayers, that youth, without crossing the threshold of the shrine and without attempting to address any words to those around him, would quietly return to his home. I felt the impulse to address him, but every time I ventured an approach, a force that I could neither explain nor resist detained me. My inquiries about him elicited the information that he was a resident of Shiraz, that he was a merchant by profession, and did not belong to any of the ecclesiastical orders. I was, moreover, informed that he, and also his uncles and relatives, were among the lovers and admirers of Sheikh Ahmad and Seyyid Kazim. Soon after, I learned that he had departed for Najaf on his way to Shiraz. That youth had set my heart aflame. The memory of that vision haunted me. My soul was wedded to his till the day when the call of a youth from Shiraz, proclaiming himself to be the Bab, reached my ears. The thought instantly flashed through my mind that such a person could be none other than that self-same youth whom I had seen in Karbila, the youth of my heart's desire. When later on I journeyed from Karbila to Shiraz, I found that he had set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. I met him on his return, and endeavored, despite the many obstacles in my way, to remain in close association with him. When subsequently he was incarcerated in the fortress of Maku in the province of Azerbaijan, I was engaged in transcribing the verses which he dictated to his amanuensis. Every night, for a period of 9 months, during which he was a prisoner in that fort, he revealed, after he had offered his evening prayer, a commentary on a juz of the Koran. A juz is 1/30th of the Koran. At the end of each month, the commentary on the whole of that sacred book was thus completed. During his incarceration in Maku, 9 commentaries on the whole of the Koran had been revealed by him. The texts of these commentaries were entrusted in Tabriz to the keeping of a certain Syed Ibrahim-i Khalil, who was instructed to conceal them until the time for their publication might arrive. Their fate is unknown until now. In connection with one of these commentaries, the Bab one day asked me, "Which do you prefer, this commentary which I have revealed, or the Ahsanul-Qisas, my previous commentary on the Surah of Joseph? Which of the two is superior in your estimation?" "To me," I replied, "the Ahsanul-Qisas seems to be endowed with greater power and charm." He smiled at my observation and said, "You are as yet unfamiliar with the tone and tenor of this later commentary. The truths enshrined in this will more speedily and effectively enable the seeker to attain the object of his quest." I continued to be closely associated with him until that great encounter of Sheikh Tabasi. When informed of that event, the Bab directed all his companions to hasten to that spot and extend every assistance in their power to Qudus, his heroic and distinguished disciple. Addressing me one day, he said, "But for my incarceration in the Jabal-i-Shadid, the fortress of Shirik, it would have been incumbent upon me to lend my personal assistance to my beloved Qudus. Participation in that struggle is not enjoined upon you. You should proceed to Karbala, and should abide in that holy city, inasmuch as you are destined to behold with your own eyes the beauteous countenance of the promised Hussein. As you gaze upon that radiant face, do also remember me. Convey to him the expression of my loving devotion." He again emphatically added these words, "Verily I say, I have entrusted you with a great mission. Beware lest your heart grow faint, lest you forget the glory with which I have invested you." Soon after, I journeyed to Karbala and lived as bidden in that holy city. Fearing that my prolonged stay in that center of pilgrimage might excite suspicion, I decided to marry. I started to earn my livelihood as a scribe. What afflictions befell me at the hands of the Sheikhis, those who profess to be the followers of Sheikh Ahmad and yet fail to recognize the Bab. Mindful of the counsels of that beloved youth, I patiently submitted to the indignities inflicted upon me. For 2 years I lived in that city. Meanwhile that holy youth was released from his earthly prison, and through his martyrdom was delivered from the atrocious cruelties that had beset the closing years of his life. 16 lunar months, less 22 days, had elapsed since the day of the martyrdom of the Bab, when on the day of Arafi, that is the 9th day of the month of Jil Hijri, in the year AH 1267, that is the 5th of October AD 1851, while I was passing by the gate of the inner courtyard of the shrine of the Imam Hussein, my eyes, for the first time, fell upon Baha'u'llah. What shall I recount regarding the countenance which I beheld? The beauty of that face, those exquisite features which no pen or brush dare describe, his penetrating glance, his kindly face, the majesty of his bearing, the sweetness of his smile, the luxuriance of his jet-black flowing locks, left an indelible impression upon my soul. I was then an old man, bowed with age. How lovingly he advanced towards me. He took me by the hand, and in a tone which at once betrayed power and beauty, addressed me in these words: "This very day I have purposed to make you known as a Babi throughout Karbala." Still holding my hand in his, he continued to converse with me. He walked with me all along the market street, and in the end he said, "Praise be to God that you have remained in Karbala, and have beheld with your own eyes the countenance of the promised Hussein." I recalled instantly the promise which had been given me by the Bab. His words, which I had regarded as referring to a remote future, I had not shared with anyone. These words of Baha'u'llah moved me to the depths of my being. I felt impelled to proclaim to a heedless people at that very moment, and with all my soul and power, the advent of the promised Hussein. He bade me, however, repress my feelings and conceal my emotions. "Not yet," he breathed into my ears. "The appointed hour is approaching. It has not yet struck. Rest assured and be patient." From that moment, all my sorrows vanished. My soul was flooded with joy. In those days, I was so poor that most of the time I hungered for food. I felt so rich, however, that all the treasures of the earth melted away into nothingness when compared with that which I already possessed. Such is the grace of God, to whom He will, He giveth it. He verily is of immense bounty. I now return, after this digression, to my theme. I had been referring to the eagerness with which Sayyid Kazim had determined to rend asunder those veils which intervened between the people of his day and the recognition of the promised manifestation. In the introductory pages of his works, entitled Shah-i Khasidi and Shah-i Qutbi, he, in veiled language, alludes to the blessed name of Baha'u'llah. In a booklet, the last he wrote, he explicitly mentions the name of the Bab by his reference to the term Zikrullah-i Azam. In it he writes, addressing this noble zikr means mention or remembrance, addressing this noble zikr, this mighty voice of God, I say, I am apprehensive of the people, lest they harm you. I am apprehensive of my own self, lest I too may hurt you. I fear you. I tremble at your authority. I dread the age in which you live. Were I to treasure you as the apple of my eye until the day of resurrection, I would not sufficiently have proved my devotion to you. How grievously Sayyid Kazim suffered at the hands of the people of wickedness. What harm that villainous generation inflicted upon him. For years he suffered silently and endured with heroic patience all the indignities, the calumnies, the denunciations that were heaped upon him. He was destined, however, to witness, during the last years of his life, how the avenging hand of God destroyed with utter destruction those that opposed, vilified and plotted against him. In those days the followers of Sayyid Ibrahim, that notorious enemy of Sayyid Kazim, banded themselves together for the purpose of stirring up sedition and mischief and endangering the life of their formidable adversary. By every means at their disposal, they sought to poison the minds of his admirers and friends, to undermine his authority and to discredit his name. No voice was raised in protest against the agitation that was being sedulously prepared by that ungodly and treacherous people, each of whom professed to be the exponent of true learning and the repository of the mysteries of the faith of God. No one sought to warn or awaken them. They gathered such force and kindled such strife that they succeeded in evicting from Karbala in a disgraceful manner the representative official of the Ottoman government, and appropriated for their own sordid aims whatever revenues accrued to him. Their menacing attitude aroused the central government at Constantinople, which dispatched a military official to the scene of agitation with full instructions to quench the fires of mischief. With the force at his command, that official besieged that city and dispatched a communication to Sayyid Kazim in which he entreated him to pacify the mind of the excited populace. He appealed to him to counsel moderation to its inhabitants, to induce them to relax their stubbornness and to surrender voluntarily to his rule. Were they to heed his counsels, he promised that he would undertake to ensure their safety and protection, would proclaim a general amnesty, and would strive to promote their welfare. If they refused, however, to submit, he warned them that their lives would be in danger, that a great calamity would surely befall them. Upon the receipt of this formal communication, Syed Kazim summoned to his presence the chief instigators of the movement, and with the utmost wisdom and affection exhorted them to cease their agitation and surrender their arms. He spoke with such persuasive eloquence, such sincerity and detachment, that their hearts were softened and their resistance was subdued. They solemnly undertook to throw open the next morning the gates of the citadel, and to present themselves in the company of Syed Kazim to the officer in command of the besieging forces. It was agreed that the Syed would intervene in their behalf and secure for them whatever would ensure their tranquillity and welfare. No sooner had they left the presence of the Syed than the Ulamas, the chief instigators of the rebellion, unanimously arose to frustrate this plan. Fully aware that such intervention on the part of the Syed, who had already excited their envy, would serve to enhance his prestige and consolidate his authority, they determined to persuade a number among the foolish and excitable elements of the population to sally forth at night and attack the forces of the enemy. They assured them of victory on the strength of a dream in which one of their members had seen Abbas, the brother of the Imam Hussein, who had charged him to incite his followers to wage holy war against the besiegers, and had given him the promise of ultimate success. Deluded by this vain promise, they rejected the advice tendered by that wise and judicious counsellor, and arose to execute the designs of their foolish leaders. Syed Kazim, who was well aware of the evil influence that actuated that revolt, addressed a detailed and faithful report on the situation to the Turkish commander, who again wrote to Syed Kazim and reiterated his appeal for a peaceful settlement of the issue. He, moreover, declared that at a given time he would force the gates of the citadel and would regard the home of the Syed as the only place of refuge for a defeated enemy. This declaration the Syed caused to be spread throughout the city. It served only to excite the derision and contempt of the population. When informed of the reception accorded that declaration, the Syed remarked from the Quran 1181, "Verily, that with which they are threatened is for the morning. Is not the morning near?" At daybreak, the appointed hour, the forces of the enemy bombarded the ramparts of the citadel, demolished its walls, entered the city, and pillaged and massacred a considerable number of its population. Many fled in consternation to the courtyard of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. Others sought refuge in the sanctuary of Abbas. Those who loved and honored Syed Kazim betook themselves to his home. So great was the crowd that hastened to the shelter of his residence that it was found necessary to appropriate a number of the adjoining houses in order to accommodate the multitude of refugees who pressed at its doors. So vast and excited was the concourse that thronged his house that when once the tumult had subsided, it was ascertained that no less than 22 persons had been trampled to death. What consternation seized the residents and visitors of that holy city! With what severity did the victors treat their terrified enemy! With what audacity they ignored those sacred rights and prerogatives with which the piety of countless Muslim pilgrims had invested the holy sites of Karbala! They refused to recognize alike the shrine of the Imam Hussein and the sacred mausoleum of Abbas as inviolable sanctuaries for the thousands who fled before the avenging wrath of an alien people. The hallowed precincts of both these shrines ran with the blood of the victims. One place, and only one, could assert its right of sanctuary to the innocent and the faithful among the population. That place was the residence of Syed Kazim. His house, with its dependencies, was regarded as being endowed with such sanctity as even the most hallowed shrine of Shia Islam had failed to retain. That strange manifestation of the avenging wrath of God was an object lesson to those who were inclined to belittle the station of that holy man. That memorable event happened on the 8th of Dhul Hijri in the year AH 1258, the 12th of January AD 1843. It is admittedly evident that in every age and dispensation Those whose mission it is either to proclaim the truth or to prepare the way for its acceptance have invariably been opposed by a number of powerful adversaries who challenged their authority and attempted to pervert their teachings. These have, either by fraud or pretense, calumny or oppression, succeeded for a time in beguiling the uninformed and in misleading the feeble. Desirous of maintaining their hold over the thoughts and consciences of men, they have, so long as the faith of God remained concealed, been able to enjoy the fruits of a fleeting and precarious ascendancy. No sooner was the faith proclaimed, however, than they found to their utter dismay the effects of their dark plottings pale before the dawning light of the new day of God. Before the fierce rays of that rising orb, all their machinations and evil deeds faded into nothingness and were soon a thing forgotten. Around Seyyed Kazim were likewise gathered a number of vain and ignoble people who feigned devotion and attachment to his person, who professed to be devout and pious, and who claimed to be the sole repositories of the mysteries enshrined in the utterances of Sheikh Ahmad and his successor. They occupied the seats of honor in the company of the assembled disciples of Seyyed Kazim. To them he addressed his disclosure, and towards them he showed marked consideration and courtesy. And yet he often, in covert and subtle phrases, alluded to their blindness, their vainglory, and their utter inaptitude for the apprehension of the mysteries of the divine utterance. Among his allusions were the following: "None can comprehend my language except him who is begotten of me." Oftentimes he quoted